Hello everybody, welcome to Climate Club. We're very pleased today to have as our guest Henry Owen, who is the lead coordinator for Community Action Groups Oxfordshire. Welcome Henry, thank you for joining us.
Thanks Kim.
Now would you like to start by telling us what your job is and what you do in your job?
Yeah, so my job is a part of the team, but what we do as a whole team is to support the network of 85 different community groups and charities in Oxfordshire that are taking action on climate change in some way. So those groups range from a group that might run a local food market at a weekend, or it might be that they are a community energy company and they put solar panels on schools and create clean energy like that, or it might be that they're a bike workshop that is accessible to the community and they train people how to ride their bikes, or anything really that is in any way related to climate action, including a poetry library that goes around on a cargo bike lending people poetry books. So there's a whole range of different community groups, and my job is to lead the team that supports those groups. So I work with 3 other people to do that, but a lot of the work is encouraging people, telling them they've got good ideas, helping them fundraise for their projects, helping them plan their projects, and helping them do things in a way that is sort of safe, and helping people with admin, like getting insurance for their work and making sure they have risk assessments and all of that, sort of the more sort of administrative side as well. And yeah, on another sort of different level, my job is to sort of be a bit of a bridge between the people that mainly fund our work, which is the county council, and a lot of the community groups that we work with. So I'm trying to get a more influence for community climate action groups at the council, and generally try and get more and more people involved in climate action in Oxfordshire.
That sounds really amazing. What do you find the most satisfying bit about your job?
Well, in normal times, the most satisfying bit is spending a lot of time cycling around the city and beyond, meeting nice people, really getting to share their passion and enthusiasm for making sort of a better world, and tackling climate change at the same time. And I work with a really nice team of people, so I find the people side of my work really satisfying, and it's super satisfying to manage to sort of like see a project through from start to finish. So go from working with people on an idea to really making it happen, and how satisfying that is for people is that's a really lovely thing about my job, which I still get to see on a computer screen, but it's a bit better when you're there in person.
For somebody who wants to be influencing environmental and social issues, do you feel that what you're doing is a good way to do that? Do you feel like you're making a big difference?
I'd like to think so. It's I think with climate action, although it's super urgent, it's also a marathon and not a sprint. And so I wish this wasn't the case, but this is going to be the challenge of the rest of our lives and far beyond. And so I think the working at a community scale is really important, because you can reach new people, you can talk to people, you can meet them face to face and really understand their lives and what matters to them, and you can make climate action relevant to people's lives in a way that sort of big national stuff can feel really distant. And I think really importantly, we're going to need everyone to be involved in some way in tackling climate change, whether it's making changes in their lives or becoming politicians, or everything in between. And I think the way to get people started in taking any kind of action really for a better world is to start small, because it's so demoralizing to feel like you're sort of shouting into the wind, or you sign lots of petitions but nothing happens. But actually, when you work at a smaller scale in your local community, you can make things change, and you can see it change in a few months or in a few years, rather than never really knowing what impact you have. Whereas you can really see, yeah, okay, I met new neighbours today and I really enjoyed it, or I actually grew those carrots, or I actually fixed my own bike today, and that's really a much you know, it's a small win, but it's it sort of builds up, and hopefully it builds people's confidence over time to sort of make bigger and bigger changes. That's what I hope will happen anyway.
Can I ask you about the kind of skills that you feel you bring to that? What skills do you need to be good at your role?
That's a good question. I personally often feel that my role is a bit of a sort of jack of all trades role, where you sort of, one of the main things you need, I think, is some confidence to give things a go, and to that confidence to sort of know that, yeah, it might not work out, and that that's okay. So I guess maybe an ability to take risks in a way. And I think the sort of particular role I have, it does involve quite a lot of fundraising, and it involves quite a lot of talking to people in the council and talking to people who work for funders and sort of, yeah, other sorts of partner organisations. So it involves quite a lot of skills of, you know, being very organised alongside, I think being good at talking to people, understanding, you know, where they're coming from or what they might need out of a situation, and almost just, I often think about, there's a bit of a translation job of sort of explaining things to different people in different ways. So, you know, I talk about what my job is to you to this group of people in one way, but when I'm explaining it to the council, I might explain it in a completely different way. Or if I'm explaining it to a funder, I might use a different sort of language to describe the same thing, which I think is sort of part and parcel of this work, where, yeah, you're just working with a broad variety of people and you have to adapt your style at different times. Yeah, and I think, you know, looking slightly longer term, I'm not always the best at this, but I think there's a real skill that's important, I think, for any sort of work in climate action, is to sort of be able to look after yourself and to be a bit resilient, and to be able to say no to things sometimes. That's what I'm working on at the moment as a skill, is to sort of, you know, I don't know how you guys feel, but, you know, climate change can feel so big and so pressing and so important as an issue to tackle, that it can be really easy to, you know, work too long, or to really emotionally get really caught up in the work, and that's really positive sometimes, but it's also really important to be able to do this for years rather than months, to sort of be able to take a step back and say, you know, that would be a great project, but I don't have time right now. And that's a sort of, I think, a key skill that I'm, yeah, definitely still learning, but saying no.
Your job sounds like a really nice sort of job for somebody who's very into sort of connecting with people. It also sounds quite sort of unique, the position you've got, but my sense is that there's a growing number of these sort of connecting, communicating skills type jobs. Would that be your impression too? So somebody might aspire to this type of role, if yours isn't the only one in the world, is it?
No, absolutely. And I think, yeah, I hope that more and more sort of these networks will be building up of community groups, and whether it's in climate action or anything else. I think, yeah, we're increasingly seeing that, you know, we need things to happen in the local communities, but we also need things to join together to tackle bigger problems, whether that's health issues or mental health, or whether it's climate change. And so I think, though, yeah, those skills of, say, making those connections and sort of translating across is really important.
That's great. Could I talk to you now about how you kind of got here? Perhaps think back to your A-levels, which wasn't too long ago. What A-levels did you do? What did you do after that?
So I did A-levels in biology, chemistry, maths and economics. So I at one point thought I might want to be a doctor, probably because my dad's a doctor. And then I realised actually I didn't want to do that. And someone in the chat's just asking what my role is, and Katy has answered that in the chat, so that's fine. Yeah, so that's what I studied at college. And I really enjoyed all of those. Yeah, and then after that, so I applied to university to study biomedical sciences. So not that, it's quite close to medicine, but it's not medicine. So it's looking more at research around that. So that's looking at genetics and things like how cells work in the body. And actually I did quite a lot of thinking about viruses and immunology, which is how the body sort of protects itself against infection. Yeah, so, I mean, there's other stuff happening around. It's sort of a bit linear, this, but After that, during that course, I got as a student, I got very involved in volunteering in Oxford. So that's when I moved to Oxford, and I got involved with doing a lot of volunteering around food waste and redistributing food in the city. And that was really sort of my route into thinking about the environment and climate change, was sort of seeing all this food going to waste, and also knowing that there were lots of people going hungry in the city and organisations that could use that food. It was just in the wrong place, and I started to just be a bit like, well, how has this happened? And that's sort of, yeah, where I sort of got more practically involved in community action on climate. And yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of other sort of threads I could pick up there that were happening at sort of a similar time, but those are the main things. And if you give me a sec, I'm just going to pull my blind down, because otherwise you're going to just see half my face.
So now you're super dark.
Oh, is that okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's interesting that several of our speakers have talked about doing voluntary work, knocking on doors and things, and that's how they've got into the roles where they are now. So how did you move from sort of your voluntary work into paid work?
Yeah. Well, I think I went a slightly unusual route here. But I think one of the most important things that I did as a student was I decided to join. I applied to join the board of a charity called Transition Network, which is quite a large charity. So they work internationally, supporting the sort of transition towns movement, which is actually very similar to what my job is now. So it's been very formative for me. And I essentially got in touch with them and just said, this was back when I was 21, about 7 years ago, and I said, I don't know a huge amount about your work, but I'm really interested in it, and I think you need more young people to be involved in your work and on your board, because you're about climate action, and as I guess you guys on the call will know, it's really important that young people are involved, I think, in sort of decisions and action about our future. And they agreed basically, and sort of took a bit of a chance and let me join their board, which is it's really quite, normally people join boards sort of at the end of their career, or it's quite a senior sort of role. It's unpaid, but it's sort of, quite, you look at the strategy and the finances, and it's quite it's generally considered, I guess, quite an important role in an organisation. And that really helped me get experience at a level that I think was just unusual for lots of other people around me, and really helped my sort of job applications to stand out when I wanted to apply for roles, and really just developed my understanding a lot of the world of work and how organisations worked, and what sort of jobs you could do in that sort of field. So that was a bit of an odd way around, but that was sort of how it worked for me. And yeah, that's how I sort of followed my interests there. And I actually realised after I did my first degree in biomedical science that, and I'm not sure I'd make the same decision now, but I sort of reasoned at the time that I didn't really have time. I wanted to do a PhD in virology and study viruses more, but I sort of reasoned at the time that I didn't have time to do that, because there was all this climate change happening, and if I spent 4 years doing that, then I'd have wasted valuable time. I still would have finished like 3 years ago, but yeah, and so I took the decision to sort of really focus my work and time, and I guess my career. But for me, it's I don't necessarily see it as something that I'll do for the rest of my life, but it's definitely what I'm doing now, and it's sort of how I want to spend my time, is on climate action. And so I actually went back to university and did a master's in climate change, which I think also, obviously has helped me to get jobs in that sort of sector as well. And given me, again, I think some of those sort of language tools of, I can sort of understand the sort of academic angle and the sort of maybe the policy angle of climate action, but also I can, I work with people in local communities, and I can sort of span that gap a bit, I think. So that's sort of some of the main sort of threads that are fed in, alongside just, taking on more and more responsibility in volunteering roles over time. So, starting out volunteering and eventually ending up sort of coordinating a number of other volunteers, and, doing things like writing the newsletters and doing the social media and, you know, building a website that I'd never, you know, things that I just gave it a go. And then, you know, some of my first jobs, which I think is quite common in a lot of organizations actually, one of my first jobs in small organizations have been in communications, which is often where, you know, organizations want to hire a young person who understands social media. And you know, I mean, at the time I felt I did, although I now don't have Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok or anything, so I'm an absolute dinosaur. But at the time it was like, wow, yeah, you know how to use Facebook, you should come and do our communications. And so I think just doing that sort of stuff as a volunteer, and being able to show that I could do it and I'd done it before made a big difference.
So it sounds as if sort of being proactive is a really sort of key part of your strategy. Is that right? Yeah,
I think so. And I think it was never a strategy at the time. I was just like, oh, I want to do all these things, and then it's figured out really well. Yeah, but certainly I think, you know, if you guys do go to university or whenever you're studying, if you've got a bit more time in the holidays or sort of around in your life, I think, yeah, following your passions in a voluntary way and then seeing where that takes you can be really, you know, a useful experience.
And is those opportunities open for people doing their A-levels, do you think? Can people volunteer, or is it does one have to wait till you get to university?
No, I think totally you can volunteer before. I think yeah, there may well be things you can do at your school or college, and then there will be almost certainly lots of local groups. Certainly if you live in Oxford, there are loads of local groups and organisations that are taking action on climate change that you could get involved with. And of course in other places as well. And you know, it's also, you know, if there's not something that's exactly what you want to be doing, you can also start something yourself, which can be, you know, really interesting experience too.
Yeah, and there's lots of good experience to be gained, isn't there, by joining some of the sort of youth movements around climate change and other issues as well, doesn't it? Such change. You know,
absolutely. And you know, on the flip side, like I learn loads from chatting to people who have been involved in the youth strikes and you know, in XR and all of this sort of movements that I haven't been involved with, but have, you know, been really learning lots about what works in terms of climate change. So you guys could probably teach me a few things as well, I imagine.
And so the job that you've got now, was that advertised as a job, or you just apply in the normal way with a CV, or did you just know somebody who knew somebody?
I know I did it. Yeah, I applied initially. So yeah, no, I mean, and I did know people. I mean, it's you know, community action on climate change there are lots of people involved, but Oxford's quite a small place, and so I think if you've been involved for a few years as a volunteer, you do get to know people a bit, and that definitely helps in terms of understanding, you know, what's going on. And but as I say, the role I was initially recruited for was quite focused on communications, and it was a sort of fairly generic project officer role, which is a sort of what a lot of entry-level roles in the charity sector are called, in my experience. And so I applied for that, and went through an interview process and then was selected for that. And then essentially I sort of joined, this was only sort of 3 years ago, but I joined as what was then sort of the most junior person in the team, and then now I'm sort of the most senior person in the team and been there the longest. And we've had a bit of a change in staff, and you know, there's only 4 of us, but I think that's another thing about joining a small organization, is that, you know, you get a lot more responsibility early on, and if you want to, there's normally ways to take on more responsibility and sort of do more, which is definitely what I've done. So yeah, I've been working at CAG Oxfordshire for 3 years now, and sort of I think I've sort of done every role in the organisation on the way through to doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, you must have learned a huge amount then. And where do you think you'll go sort of after this? What's your kind of career, or do you not have an idea of where you're just going to wait?
Oh, let me tell you, that question doesn't, I don't know if about anyone else, but for me that question does sort of play on my mind a bit, and I do really enjoy my job, and I'm not looking to leave anytime soon, but I'm sort of always sort of thinking about what next, and you know, wanting to have a bit more time for some of my own projects. So a lot of my time is spent supporting other people, which is great. I get a lot out of that, but sometimes I sort of have my own ideas for projects I'd like to do. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but I would like to One thing that I would like to do is to maybe work for a funding agency for a bit. So a lot of, if you work in charities or in small sort of community organisations, you realise that unfortunately a lot of the power in that situation is held by the funders, the people that have money and can, you know, you normally have to apply. You've got a project idea and you apply to someone, you say, I'd really like to do this, will you give us some money to do it? And they have a lot of power then to decide how they who they give their money to and how they spend it. And so, and personally, I think often those decisions aren't very good ones. And so I'm quite interested in trying to influence that, you know, big grant foundations like the National Lottery, or, you know, the famous ones would be like Esme Fairbairn and the Tudor Trust and others are sort of large national organisations that spend millions of pounds a year supporting community groups and initiatives and campaigns. And I think if you can, one thing I'd like to do is sort of try and get involved in those and influence how they spend their money a bit, to be a bit more radical. Yeah, and spend a bit more money. So a lot of them, you know, they've got billions of pounds and they spend millions every year. And I think because of climate change, they should be spending a lot more each year and not really planning to be around in 50 years' time, because it'll be too late at that point. So anyway, that's a bit more technical, but trying to, yeah, influence funders is what I'd like to do at some point.
That's an interesting way to drive your career, isn't it? See something that needs doing and, sorry, somebody's ringing me. See something that needs doing and then get stuck into to make it better, to do it better. That's interesting.
Yeah.
From your perspective, Henry, that you're working with all these groups, do you feel positive and optimistic about our abilities to tackle climate change as a society?
Yeah, this is something I think about a lot. Do I feel positive? Probably not. But do I feel sort of hopeful? Yes. So I think, you know, I've not been doing this a really long time, but I guess for maybe the last sort of 10 years, I've been really quite passionate about climate action and getting involved in various sorts of climate action myself. And I think with a lot of optimism at first, and then a few waves of feeling a bit like, oh, this is pointless, it's not going anywhere. And then I think, you know, over the last few years, hopefully, I'm sure this will keep changing over time, but I think developing a bit of a more longer term perspective and realizing that, you know, although it's an emergency, it's also going to be a really long emergency. And there's a rush, and there's also a need to plan for the long term and be sustainable. And so, yeah, my job gives me a really, I think, great perspective of seeing not all of, but so many of the amazing things that communities are doing that are tackling climate change and crucially, like, you know, making their communities better at the same time. So, you know, for example, food projects that are stopping food from going to waste, but they're also making sure that everyone in their community can eat healthily and no one's going hungry. And that's like totally inspiring. And, you know, you also see all the, you know, you read the news every day and it's pretty depressing. So I guess, yeah, I think what keeps me going is, like, you know, the hope of that things will be better and things can be different. I think that's one of the things you see working at a local level, is how quickly things can change if you know, if people want them to, and, you know, you see that around you day to day.
Thank you, Henry. We're gonna run out of time, so I just want to get in a question from one of the guys. So Katia is asking, if you think about joining a board as a young person, what sort of commitment, if you're going to do it, say alongside A levels or perhaps your degree, what sort of commitment is that? That's just going to be a fairly quick answer, if you would.
Yeah, so it depends on the organisation, and so some boards are very active and they do lots of voluntary work, and some boards just meet, you know, every few months and they review things. I would say setting aside at least a day or two a month. Obviously, it doesn't have to be all at once, but is probably sensible. And I would suggest, if you're local, then Oxford Hub run a sort of trustees programme that is about getting people that are underrepresented on trustee boards involved in being trustees, and they offer training and support to do that. So I would suggest locally, Oxford Hub is a great place to start if you're interested.
Thank you, Henry. Has anybody else got any more questions before we end? Nope. Well, I'm just going to say thank you so much, Henry, for joining us today and for giving us your insights into community action around climate change, and also explaining to us your career path and how you came to be doing what you're doing today. Good luck with your work, and yeah, look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks very much, Kim. Yeah, appreciate it, and good luck, everyone.